Tolstoy here. So this I'm gonna have a long video here. I'm gonna talk about how to set up, especially if you play Tetris, your setup so you can play on your box TV, CRT TV, cassette ray tube TV, and your computer, which is here in the background with the microphone and stuff. This video is going to be long. I'm going to showcase a lot of stuff. There are several chapters. I'm going to talk about consoles, controllers, captures, cables, and capture cards. The cards for the games and the ROMs and cameras and stuff. So that's going to be a long one, but they're going to be chapters. So let's not lose a lot of time. Maybe first let's talk about the most obvious thing, NTSC, which is the I'm gonna say it like this: North American and Japanese standard, which runs on 60 hertz because the outlets run on 60 hertz alternating current, and in Europe, Africa, and some parts of America as well. Have the PAL standard, which is supposed to be an upgraded standard for TVs, which runs on 50 hertz, which fundamentally changed how consoles and TVs work. So 50 frames or 60 frames per second, and then the console need to output accordingly. And in case of Tetris, this had fundamental differences on the gameplay. So if you play on a PAL console with 50 hertz, the level of speeds, the gravity, and the delayed auto shift has been adjusted such that level 19 is the kill screen. So it will never get any faster, which is manageable with DAS because DAS is faster. Sorry for all this information. For all the information. And on NTSC, the kill screen is on 29. DAS is a bit slower. So the auto repeater on NTSC for DAS is around 10 hertz, and for PAL it's 12 hertz. So fundamentally different game, fundamentally different ways of play the game. Let's not lose time. Consoles. This is a PAL TV. CRT TV. I'm going to talk about this in a bit, but know that a lot of European CRT TVs can only output NTSC signals in black and white, this one included. So a lot of Europeans are used to play NTSC in black and white, and yeah, that's a bit sad, but it is what it is. Okay, original console, the North American NES NTSC. Put in the game, power button, reset button, 2 controller ports. RCA outputs, only 2 because it's a mono signal. So yellow is always video. Red, white, or black are the signals for audio. Usually if you have stereo, it's red and white or red and black, but that doesn't matter. These can be, the cables can be used exchangeably, because back in the day, analog signals weren't that complicated, so the this port wouldn't use anything else than a cable, copper cable. On the back, you have the power thingy, and then the switch for the RF output, which is this one. Looks like an RCA, has the exact same pin as the RCA. Or the output, but it's not RCA, so please do not plug in a 3-way cable here and here. It's not good, and it's not recommended. This one is RF, which is an antenna signal, I think, which could be used to go into the TV via coaxial or whatever, and would also deliver the image on one of these channels on your TV. So you have to scan the TV for this channel to find it. We're not going to talk about that anymore. Only know that in some cases you can use this one as well for video output. So you could actually use this on your TV and this one on your capture card. I'm not going to talk about it. I have no idea how that works. PAL. Looks pretty much the same, but here it says European version in the third row. Could say anything else, or in some cases these were replaced, and it could be an American one, which is the standard and doesn't have anything written here. Could also say Mattel version, Spanish version, or a lot of things. Same ports, same buttons. Optimized for PAL. Now here comes the stupidity of Nintendo back in the day. I'm sorry to say that, but that was really stupidity. PAL A and B, only a distinction only made for NES, I think, which was region specific. So certain games only work on PAL A consoles or PAL B consoles. But I think NES Tetris works on either of them, so you wouldn't care too much. Sometimes you buy a game for PAL B and you have a PAL A console and it wouldn't work. It's a mess. Mattel version, that's I think from the UK, so it's not the same. I'm not sure if that's PAL B or A, but the other one is the other one. Same outputs. So for Tetris, that really doesn't make any difference if you have PAL A or B, but for certain games it would. There is also one rare version, which looks a PAL version. No, not a PAL version, actually. It's a SECAM version. SECAM is a standard. The third one probably only used in France. It's kind of a rare one. It's a third TV standard. And here you wouldn't have RCA, but it would have a different output here, which is pretty much identical to the SNES output, but it's not the same, so you cannot use, as far as I know, the SNES cables. Another analog console was even before the NES, the Famicom, which is basically in the inside an NTSC NES. The controllers are built in originally. This one is a modified console by Gunter, so shout out to Gunter. Has RCA output, and he put the second controller port here because then I can use my, instead of the second Famicom one, which has a microphone and a loudspeaker in there, one game or so used it. I can use my regular controller here. So if you want to play NTSC games, because that's an NTSC console, you also need like this, because the number of pins weren't the same, but they can be used with this adapter. So that's now in many cases way cheaper, and if you either want to do it yourself or have someone to do it for you, that's a cheaper option. So NTSC, PAL, A and B. Forget about A and B. So clone consoles. There are three types of clone consoles. Regular chips for the CPU, PPU, and APU, CPU central processing unit, and then picture and audio processing units. Original chips in there, that's one option, which is equivalent to these in most cases. Then there's FPGA, that's field programmable gate array, which are chips that have not logic gates in them set, but logic gates, I will say it's emulated via lookup tables. So you will get the same result, but people say it's not emulation. It is emulation, it's hardware emulation, but in most cases it will be indistinguishable between real chips and FPGA chips. So FPGA is anyway the future, so there are consoles for that. I don't have FPGA consoles, but what I have is my first clone console I bought, which you will see here, beautiful, yes, stereo out, that's an upgrade. and it has digital out via HDMI. It has SNES and NES, which you can switch here. It has ports for NES and SNES, and it has switches on the back to switch between PAL and NTSC. Perfect console. I bought that, brought people over for a Tetris event when I first joined the community, and got a lot of complaints. This one, for some reason, I think it might be emulation, I don't know. Probably not. But it introduced, probably what it is now that I think of it. It's first digitally processed and then output via this analog. So something here to mention is anytime you change from analog to digital or from digital to analog, you will introduce inevitably some delay or lag. So if you want to play on a CRT TV, you want to have analog output and then you don't have delays and don't have a lag. And that's the way you want to play, because on level 19s onward, the speeds, especially if we play DAS, will make a huge difference and you will feel it. There are more options for clone consoles. I'm not sponsored or not especially. I'm not recommending it more than other brands, but it's what I have. It's the Hyperkin Retron 1 AV. That's only analog. Only has mono output, and unfortunately cannot switch between PAL or NTSC. So if you want to play both, you would have to buy one for PAL specifically and one for NTSC specifically, and maybe if you're from Europe, import it from the US, which with the tariffs nowadays might not be the best option. All of these ones I showed up until now, including the next one, have the same ports for the controllers, so you can use all the controllers there. This one is the one I would recommend. It's pretty much a standard nowadays. So Scout's video, even though it's extremely well done, is not 2025 conform anymore, I would say. For the most part, it is very good, but advancements in technology like this makes it in a way obsolete. Not 100%, very good, but yeah. 2 controller ports, it's HD, so digital output as well. As with the 2 HD, you have HDMI out and RCA out. You can change the aspect ratio of the digital signal from 16 to 9 to 4 to 3, whatever you prefer. 4 to 3, of course, is the original aspect ratio. And that's why that's the standard nowadays in Europe, at least. PAL and NTSC switch, so you can play both using only one console. And then there is emulation, and unfortunately this one is emulation, even though it looks like it could be real hardware. It's the official Nintendo NES Mini. Only HDMI output, and you already know that this is not really an option because it will introduce lag. But if you're a casual player, why not? It does not contain Tetris. There are ways to put your own ROMs onto it via software hacks, and I will not talk about it, and I don't think it's a good idea to hack these. Yeah. Whenever you have ROMs, make sure you legally acquire them through dumping your own cards via dumper and then put them wherever you need them. I think that's kind of legal, or that's legal. Now, controllers. We're at the second chapter. So for the NES Mini, you have the NES controller. That's actually a third-party one. But as you can see, the controller port is a different one. It's a proprietary format. Plug it in. It's cool because it once it's in, it will not fall off. And now, since that proprietary format is used also on the SNES Mini. You can use, I have here the European, to call it one, with the same thingy, so you can use both controllers actually on that. And speaking of it, that's a European SNES. That's how European SNES look like, very similar to the Super Famicom, but it's a Super NES. And of course, you can use the controllers also here interchangeably. Yeah, that's everything I'm going to talk about this. Not recommended at all. Not recommended because it introduces lag. The other ones are recommended. Controllers. So I'm going to unwrap my two controllers I want to showcase. Unfortunately for you, but fortunately for me, I exchanged my buttons, AB buttons, so the action buttons plus the D-pad, with Game Boy buttons, so they are convex and not concave. And also the D-pad is a bit different. I like it more. So you can do this because they have the same size. That's cool. Why am I showing two controllers? Well, on the back, there it says model number NES 004 on this one. Model number NES 004E for this one. And E stands for European. So to make things more complicated for us Europeans, you have a European thing and an American one. In many cases, these can be used interchangeably. They have the same ports, but some PCBs or what's on the PCB will only allow you one type. And there are people who know how that works. I don't know how it works in detail. I just know that that's sometimes a bit of a problem. There are ways around it, but I'm not going to talk about it. Then you have the Hyperkin Cadet for the AV. There's also a version for the HD console. They are pretty much similar. They have here a bit of a notch or whatever, and the back has this to make it a better holdable, a bit rounded. But the problem with that is you might not want to use these for rolling. At least I would say that. I'm not a roller, so I can't say it. That's a good option, and it's also legal for all the tournaments because CTWC is sponsored by Hyperkin, and they're pretty much the same. What you can also do is exchange the PCBs and the buttons and rubber inlays on these with the original NES. There are also third-party NES controllers. I don't have that. Oh my god, the dog bone. So that came with the top loader NES, which came out later around the area of the SNES, and also has kind of form factor of the SNES controller. That's a Japanese one, and you know, if the cable is short, it's from Japan because the living rooms probably were a bit smaller in Japan than in the US. So if you have a shorter cable, that's in Japan. Then you have a third-party controller. I love it. It's my main from CTG. That's classic Tetris Germany. I think Martin, who also does the trophies for CTWC DAS, made these ones. Very nice. Has kind of the same PCB in it, same size of buttons and everything, and you can easily open it by hand. That's about controllers. And if you are like me and most players that played years, you might have something like this. Third-party PCB that you can use with Goofy Foot if you change something here. Third-party one that broke, unfortunately. You can order them online. That's an original one with the proper chip. So level shifter chips. And of course rubber inlays and button stuff and empty shells. So you can have fun assembling and combining stuff. And then you of course have the illegal one controllers, these that don't have the same button size and or the turbo functionality. Most well known is the Max, the one that also was futuristically designed. So Hank Rogers' company. Hank Rogers, the same guy who licensed Tetris to himself or his own company, and later, or at the same time actually, to Nintendo. That's some trivia for you. My favorite one, the SNES Advantage. Super illegal for tournaments, I'd say. Not all of the tournaments. 2 controller ports, so you can switch between player 1 and 2. Big A and B buttons, turbo, and you can even adjust how fast the auto repeat on the turbo buttons work. And a beautiful stick here. So I think, if I remember correctly, Ronkly has a max out with one of these, so that's it's at least playable, right? Capture. Okay, let's look at the RCA cables. What do I need? So I will put away the Famicom because it's kind of similar to the NESs. I will keep one NES and these 2 here because there's only like 2 types of capture, analog and digital. Oh yeah, I found the SNES cable actually. So that's similar to the SECAM, the French cable of the NES, which is super rare. I'm missing one cable actually. So RCA, or we call it Chinch in Europe, has yellow for video and red and white, or red and black for audio. The 3-way cables were for audio and video. Sometimes you would take them apart to only have these separate. Older models came in black and white, red and white for stereo, or red and black, a bit more modern. Can be used interchangeably because, as I said, the signals weren't that complicated. So let's look at the analog ones, and I will actually not talk about the NES because it's the same with these 2, so we're only going to talk about these. And the NES, these were the video and audio outputs. So analog. There's only one output for TV, so how do you get your signal to your computers? Well, it's not that straightforward. You would need to split the signal, and for that we have splitter cables. Sometimes they're cables, sometimes they're adapters. The thing is, I will use this nomenclature only once, just that you know it existed back in the 90s. Nowadays that's outdated and I won't use it anymore, but these were called male and these were called female for, yeah, whatever reason. But the thing about it is you have one output into 2 outputs, so it splits it. That's why they're often also called Y cables, because it looks like a Y. Ypsilon-Kabel in German. You put these splitters in the video, in the audio, and then you need to be careful that you're not gonna get tripped with the colors. So in our case, this one is the video, this one is the audio. So one video to the TV and one, yeah, let's use this actually, video to the PC, and then one audio, and you could use a second splitter to have it in stereo, but that's actually a stupid idea. And one for the PC. Now we have for the PC the same outputs as for the TV, the RCA. Just one audio channel, of course, but how do we get that into the PC? Huh? That's Scout's video from back in the day. That's a capture card for analog signals. Different companies in Europe. There we have that one from the Netherlands, Gembird, but that's exactly the same PCB and stuff like in the US versions. There are several companies that distribute these. You have 3 RCA cables inputs and also the more modern S video, but that's Super NES area and later, so we're not going to use that. We're only going to use these 3, and let's put in yellow to yellow. And these ones, of course, we only have one audio channel on that. And then we're going to plug this one, and you have to trust me on that, in the PC, which is not on because it makes too much noise. This one's going into the TV. Now, I live in Europe, and us Europeans, we are weird. A lot of TVs don't have these RCA inputs. That's unfortunate. Instead, we have this weird thingy in the back here, which is called SCART. And back in the 90s, when I grew up, that was normal for me. Looking back, I must say that's anything but normal to have these cables. These are SCART cables. But to be fair, the signal on the SCART cable is much better than with RCA, and S video was even later, had even better signal. So what do we do? You find that often in European gamer households. These are actually SCART and RCA. I have a lot of them. Something to note, if you look at the pins in here, that doesn't have all the pins. That doesn't have all the pins. So there are 3 types. One that go unidirectionally in this direction. The ones that go unidirectionally in this direction. Oh, there's actually 4, I think. Ones that are interchangeable, I think. I'm not 100% sure. And then if you have €2 more, I would certainly invest in this one. Has S video and RCA, and has also input-output switch. So what we do in Europe, why is Europe so weird? We put them here like yellow to yellow, red to red, white to white, and you see here's a notch, so you can only put that in one direction anyway. Plug it in like this, and you're set. Not complicated at all. So something to mention with these splitters. It splits the audio signal into the computer and the TV, as well as the video signals. And what that does is reduce the strength of the signal. So it would, like, half the signal goes here and half the signal go to computer. And since a lot of TVs in Europe are black and white, and we know that level 27, for example, is terrible colors, we already know that black and white 27 is terrible. Black and white 27 with a split signal is a catastrophe. So we want to avoid these splitters, and we want to avoid AV. If you have the money, don't go for AV. Go for the digital version. It was wrong what I said. Don't avoid AV, avoid AV splitting, okay? Option number 2. I mentioned it before, this has two outputs, and hey, we actually have stereo sound, so cool. So that only goes into the TV. No need for, yeah, I pretend like I plug it in. That only goes into the TV, and then we have HDMI signal, so digital signal simultaneously. And of course, as we learned, the audio, the analog signal directly, and then there's simultaneously digitization of the signal through the HDMI. So on that one you would have delay, but we don't care because we only use it for capture. And again, what we have is a capture card, because even though you might have HDMI on your computer, the HDMI you have on your computer is only output for your screen. So you want an input, and that's the input HDMI, output USB. And the same way as with the analog capture card, this one is recognized as a webcam signal in your OBS. That's perfect. Now you don't lose brightness here, and you have a digital signal as well, which gives you much crisper video signal. One thing to mention, we will talk about cameras later, but if you use like a USB hub, that might be a problem. Depending on your ports or software, I don't know where the problem actually starts. You can only have one signal, one video signal per USB. So you want to use a different USB port for that and the camera, but that's for later. If you have USB-C only, that's the small one here, you might want to invest in something like this. The big ones, USB 3 and 2 and USB-C. And then that was something I bought when I first started with my NES Mini. Thought that would be a good idea to play on my flat screen. This one has RCA input and HDMI output, but we said already lag introduction through the process here. There's also one where the direction is the other way. There's also very similar ones that have RCA on both sides, where you can switch between PAL and NTSC, but also with this one you will introduce a lag, but that's actually a cool thing. Then if you have like the Famicom, my camera cut because the limit was reached and I didn't recognize it at the time. I was talking about if you have the Famicom, so the family computer, the modded one where you only have RCA out and no input here, you would need this adapter, so female to female, to use that stupid, outdated, not politically correct nomenclature anymore, and that's why I won't use it anymore. You use this and then split from there. I'm not sure if I forgot to talk about different capture cards. This is also an HD capture card with HDMI in and USB out. You don't need that. You only need the smaller ones. I found out some more info was lost, so here we go again. So you can also use this kind of emulation, which is through the Nintendo Switch, so official emulation there. But of course, if you want to stream it, you would have to go through the dock and the HDMI out, and then of course inevitably you would have delay. And you could use different controllers. Dr. John Joy-Cons into this one, which I prefer over the Pro Controller. If you play on PC, there are several options for controllers. For example, the Xbox controller, which I like way better than the Switch one actually. Or what you can buy actually is something like this. You'll find that online. That's different controller inputs like the Super NES. I don't know if that's Super Famicom or whatever. No, for sure it's not Super Famicom. I don't know what. MD, that's Mega Drive. So Mega Drive, or you can put your NES here and then USB into your computer, and then you need to run software in the background which key binds your button inputs to the keys you would use in the emulator. And unfortunately there's a turbo. In terms of emulator, it's a gray zone. I cannot talk about it too much. I won't talk about it too much, but as I said, you have to have legally acquired ROMs, and ROMs are the games. Okay, let's talk about games. Tetris. If you have an oval shape here, it's 99% or more at the NTSC version, because in North America, Canada, and Brazil actually, they had the oval seal of quality by Nintendo. So that's NTSC, but you don't want to use it, and I'm going to tell you why you don't want to use it nowadays. European one around, and says European version on this one. There of course are several region-specific ones. Well, in Europe we also had, and mine is a bit in bad condition, the multi-cards. These are legal ones. Tetris, Super Mario, and Nintendo World Cup. Super Mario. Yeah. And then, of course, if you go to events in Europe, then Gunter will be able to provide you with these. Tetris Gym, made by the community, with a lot of updated features and additional features and quality of life improvements. So I would highly recommend that over the original ones because of rocket skip and a lot of things you can do there. And then of course you can order these online. I don't know how how legal this thing is, but apparently it hasn't been shut down. Programmed by the great Kiryava from, yeah, and some other people joined late, like I think Fractal, Hydrant Dude, and Solhasadar, and others are involved with this. So V6 is the latest one. This is V5, but that works perfectly fine for me. I really want F6, but for now, V6. And then flash cards. So these are cards where you can put your games, aka ROMs, onto a mini SD, or I don't know how they're called. And then you can choose in the menu in the OS of the EverDrive which game you want to play. Then it's transferred to the ROM chip on here, and then it's identical as if you had one of these. There's one issue with the EverDrive, which is a very, very good card because it contains all chips, or almost all chips that were ever used in games. So compatibility is nearly 100% with games. But on the Retrons, all of the Retrons, it won't work, unfortunately. There's an alternative, or multiple alternatives, which I don't have. The Polish company Krzysio, so the KrzysioCart, you can buy, that will work with this. You can also buy knockoff multi-cards, ones that you can put your own games to, or ones that contain Tetris, which I don't recommend either of them actually. But if you're lucky, it will work and might be cheaper and might break within a month. funnily enough, with the Retron 2 HD, the one that has Super NES and NES, the FX Pack Pro, which is also the expensive variant by Krix, the Ukrainian company. They make the super great cards with all the chips, so FX chips included and stuff. This one works actually with the Retron 2 HD. I don't know why. So don't buy the EverDrive N8 Pro except if you have original hardware, and there's also the option to have a USB output for NES Champs, which has the option to use it like this. Cameras, last chapter. So what I have on my setup is this. That's kind of a standard camera, the 920 by Logitech face camera. I put on the TV like this. Make sure that I use a different USB port than on the other cams, and sometimes if I'm super crazy, I go like this. Have a second camera for my hand cam, and then I use a different USB port, of course, for this, and this. And then I have a three-way signal. If you are fancy, you can also have super nice quality with either mirrorless or mirror camera SLR. This one doesn't work. Even though it has HDMI Mini output, it can't process direct out. So make sure that your camera, if you want to use something like this, which gives you beautiful picture with different levels of sharpness, make sure that you can have direct output. Okay, I think that's all there is to talk about. If you have an analog signal, so recap, if you have an analog signal, you need to split it. You use splitter, one goes here, one goes to the PC. Disadvantage, less bright image. Advantage, the whole setup is probably cheaper, except for when you import an NTSC console from the US, then it's going to be expensive for us Europeans. My recommendation, as I said already, Retron 1 HD. Get the heck out of here, camera. This one. I don't like flash cards too much, even though they're super handy as long as for newer ROM patches. But if you only want to play like Tetris Gym, that's what I recommend. Retron 1 HD Tetris Gym. You can put any controller. You can switch between PAL and NTSC. Good thing about the Tetris Gym is it supports both and also recognizes in what mode the console is. So for European TVs, color. On PAL, different aspect ratio bit, so you need to get used to NTSC and PAL. And NTSC only in black and white, but I mean, after playing it for half an hour, there's not really an issue anymore. Yeah, that's it. It has been a very long video, and thanks for watching. Flattering angle here.